Thank you so much for this amazing introduction. And of course, thank you so much for coming this early today. It's really, I appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about generative AI and its impact on engaging user storyboards. But before we begin, I want to test your intuition. So I'll show you a few images, and if you think they are done by AI, raise your hand. If you think they are real images, don't raise your hand. All right? So the first image, who thinks it's an AI work? All right, so half of you. That's great. What about this image? Is this the work by AI? Okay, a bit less, but interesting to see. You can also check around if actually your neighbor thinks the same. So in reality, yes, the first image is the work of AI, while the second image is the real image that I found on pexels.com, is the free stock website. And this is exactly what we are going to talk about today. So how to create realistic, highly engaging, highly detailed images for your storyboards to make them engaging. So on our agenda, first of all, I will step back and I'll talk about basics. So what are the storyboards, why do we need them, and why are they so important in the UX design process? Then we are going to dive into the practical part using generative AI. So basically, I'll share my step-by-step process and tips that I did along the way. And finally, we will conclude with lessons learned and some challenges I faced. And hopefully you can also learn from that if you want to apply it to your own work. All right, I'm Tetiana. Hello again. So I'm a senior UX designer at BIM Collab, where we create online collaboration tools for architects and engineers in the construction industry. Besides that, I'm also an instructor at LinkedIn Learning. I record a bunch of online courses on different UX topics. I'll share with you a QR code of my website later if you want to scan and learn more about that. By the way, I'm also Ukrainian-born, and currently I'm based in the Netherlands. So it's really nice also to be here in Spain and to travel. All right, but this is not about me today. Let's talk about storyboards. Why do we care about them? Why do we even need them in this process? So I like to think of storyboards as a comic strip with a set of images that are chronologically placed one after each other. And it's a great way to actually visualize your user's journey, or namely interaction between your user and the product. Because it's visual, you can also communicate your story through images, not just with your words, which is actually way easier for people to comprehend. And in the UX design process, as designers, we often have to face challenging problems. And those design problems, they are very difficult to explain to others, especially non-technical stakeholders. And, instead of just going directly to your wireframing, prototyping, opening up Figma, Adobe XD, whatever you use, it's very nice to step back and actually, create the storyboards to explain the high-level problem and to give this high-level overview. So just again about basics, storyboards consist of 3 core elements. And this is scenario. So basically, the problem that you want to show that your user faces. Then it's visuals. So basically, key scenes and key moments of interaction between your user and the product. And finally, captions. So basically, they give more context about who your character is, what's the mood, what's the environment, and all the important details that other people need to know. So then, of course, I'm talking about that because there's a huge challenge. I face it at my work, I heard other designers also do it, and maybe you also face the same problem. And this is actually with visuals. Because how can we create highly engaging visuals, not just basic sketches that we do in 5 seconds, but something that really tells a story, communicates your message in a clear way, and also sparks emotion and hopefully inspires some action. And with storyboards, when they inspire action, then it means that all stakeholders and your team, they are aligned. They empathize with the user, and that leads to better design decisions. So we all know this kind of approach, I hope. So it's basically, you grab your sticky note, you can quickly sketch your storyboard, and it works. It's a traditional way in the UX design process. However, if you really want to increase engagement and increase the level of detail, it's often time-consuming. And we don't have the time. We often have to juggle multiple tasks at the same time, and that's a true story. And then, of course, you have to be proficient in sketching. For me, honestly, I love designing UI, UX, but when it comes to grabbing a pencil or like a tablet, I'm really bad in it, so I would never do it. And of course, some designers, they rely on stock images, and it works as well. However, if you have multiple scenes, it's very difficult to find the consistency, because you might have certain pictures, but then for other scenes, you cannot find anything that makes sense. So I'm talking about that because, with all of these challenges, you might think, okay, whatever, I'll just do my sketches, and that's it. However, I just wanted to do something different, something out of comfort zone, and that's when I started exploring generative AI. And I ended up using Adobe Firefly as my go-to tool for storyboards. I'm actually curious in the audience, who ever used Adobe Firefly for work or just for fun? I see someone. Okay, great. I see some people. That's really interesting. Because usually when I ask others, people are like, what is that? So Adobe Firefly is, of course, created by Adobe. It's very simple how it works. Well, for users, you just basically have your text prompt area. You describe your image that you want to generate, and then actually let AI do all the magic work for you. That sounds very easy, right? But I'm going to get more into details in a bit of how to make it better, how to make your prompt better, how to actually get more engaging visuals with that. So the project for which I created storyboards is called a 3D model web viewer. And you might be thinking, what is actually a 3D model web viewer? Well, this is how it looks. The idea is that the teams of architects, engineers, and cross-functional teams, they can basically upload their 3D model files and see them in one cohesive project. As in this example, basically a large building complex. And why it's important is because all of those people, they can collaborate together in real time, zoom into the model, make some measurements, take some notes, and more importantly, actually spot any problems that occur in this model. And why is this important is because you might have this problem that your windows don't match the size, or for example, a pipe is hitting a wall. And this is something you really want to see early in the design process, instead of waiting until the construction phase to actually realize, oh my God, we have a problem here. So for that, first of all, we created this product for office professionals. And as you can imagine, Office has large desktop screens. It's a quiet area most of the time. So you can really take all the time you need to actually zoom into the model, spot some issues, and actually make informed decisions. But we talked more and more to our users, and we found new demand. And that demand was actually using this product on a construction site. And as you can imagine, this is a quite different environment. This is not your office. This is something really different. So that means that most likely our product needs to have different features rather than we have on a desktop app. And also, of course, responsive design, which is quite a standard nowadays. So instead of immediately going wireframing, opening my Figma, like designing features, this was the perfect moment to create highly engaging storyboards to actually shape product direction. So I'm going to share with you how. But before, so when you use generative AI, you have to get really clear on the three following things. First of all, main user scenario, which kind of problem you are solving. Then, of course, key scenes. So how many of them do you want to have? Is it just 2 scenes or maybe 10? There's quite a difference. And of course, context. Who is your character? What is he or she doing there? Is it inside or is it outside environment? Is this gloomy weather outside, or is this just something cheerful you want to represent? That's very important, and I always basically advise to write these things down on paper, on your laptop, just to really clear your head and align on your thoughts. So in my case, I decided to keep things very, very simple. I chose user persona who is an architect. Let's call him Joe. And Joe is a very experienced professional with many years of experience behind. And from time to time, he has to visit a construction site to actually check the progress of the project. So therefore, my main user scenario is as following. An architect uses a tablet on site to compare a 3D model with the actual building progress. And for this problem that I highlight here, I decided to go with 4 simple scenes. So this is the moment of arrival at the construction site, then we have the moment of opening the application, then the close-up of interaction, and finally, actually the moment of collaboration, because this is what exactly the tool is about. So these were my first sketches. I still grabbed my sticky notes and I decided to sketch things very quickly. And as you can see, it's far from perfect. And of course it works. But why I did it is because before going into this AI image generation, I really wanted to know what I want to generate, just not to waste my time. So if you go and work with AI image generators, I also really recommend to sketch things out, just to clear out your thoughts. All right, finally, the practical part. So Adobe Firefly. For our first scene, the moment of arrival at the construction site, this was the prompt that I used. I hope you can also read it back there. So as you can see, it's quite detailed. I'm mentioning my user persona, an architect, arriving at the construction site, with also a detail that he holds a tablet in one hand, and also other details about wearing a hard hat and also safety vest. So I highlighted some keywords because I wanted to stress the importance of being specific and detailed in your prompt. Because if your prompt is quite generic, then you let AI think for you. But in this way, the more details you give, the better result you'll get. So this was my first result. And for the ones who never seen Adobe Firefly before, the user interface is very simple. So in the middle, you have just your basically images, your results. Under that, you have your prompt area that you can actually tweak and regenerate. And on the side, you also have image settings that are also quite fun to work with. So for the first result, I would say it's not bad, right? I mean, we have architects, they look into the camera, all looks quite realistic. However, for me, I really miss this moment of arrival, like it's just people standing, staring at the camera, but they are not really arriving. So when I actually went back and forward with my prompt, I started to tweak it around. I realized that AI understands walking as a keyboard way better, and also I added full body. So it's really specific that you see the full picture of my scene. So yeah, I was quite happy with that, but I was thinking, what can I do more? How can I make it even better? And this is not about tweaking prompt again. This is actually going and experimenting with effects, so image effects. And you can see how here I applied golden color tone and also wide camera angle, and I would say the images started to look way more appealing, way more attractive with this great saturation and nice contrast, nice colors. Yeah, and I didn't stop there, because I just went back and forward and I realized that I want to stick with digital art as my effect. And the reason for that is because I didn't want to really have generic stock-looking like pictures. I wanted to have something more as comics, something more fun, more engaging to actually bring up this message to my stakeholders. So I finally decided to use this image. and it served me as my first AI-generated visual for my first scene. All right. Then we move to the second scene, the moment of opening the 3D model web viewer on a tablet. And again here, the used prompt is quite specific. So I mentioned again my user persona, an architect who holds a tablet, and actually this screen is visible that shows the homepage of my application. You can also see under the text prompt there are effects that I still decided to reuse. I still use golden color tone, wide camera angle, and digital art as my effect, and all this just to strive for consistency, because every key scene in your storyboard has to be consistent. So when I clicked on Generate, this is what I got. And I would say I was a bit surprised because, well, where's my first character? Who are those people? It doesn't really match anything what I did just right now before for my first scene. So this is something to be really aware when you work with AI image generation. Sometimes when you have a very different prompt, you have actually zero consistency between the scenes. But well, luckily, well, this is still the comparison between the first scene and the second scene. You can see it's actually zero consistency and zero matching. But luckily, in Adobe Firefly, you have style reference as a feature. And this is very powerful to use, and I also really recommend using it all the time if you work with storyboards, because you can actually upload any image that will serve as a reference for next generated images in your work. And the reason for that is that you can create a consistent look across multiple assets that is really important for engaging storyboards. So I decided to use my first AI-generated image. You can see highlighted here in the square box. And the results started to look a bit better, I would say, because at least there was some sort of consistency. However, I was not really impressed by kind of visual effects because you can see this unnatural glow behind, and it was still not exactly what I wanted to achieve. So for style reference, you have visual intensity and strength as main features you can play around with. And visual intensity means the level of details, so if you increase it, the more details you will get. And strength means the level of adherence to the reference image. And as you can see here, the values are set by default just in the middle. So I didn't change my prompt here. I didn't work with that at all. I just decided to play around with these sliders. And first of all, when I decided to increase visual intensity, to increase the level of details, I would just get this overwhelming golden color in the background. And honestly, it just distracted attention from my main character. So all the attention would just go to all these details. So I just decided, I'll do something else. And after going back and forward, because this is what you do when you explore the tool for the first time, you basically have to decrease visual intensity, meaning you have to decrease the level of details. And actually, also, I would advise to increase and maximize the level of adherence, or therefore strength. And right here, we still see our character, and we still see a lot of details in the background, but it's not that overwhelming. I would say it's matching way better. So at this moment, I was quite happy with the result, and this was exactly the image that I used for my second AI-generated, for my second scene, for my AI-generated storyboard. All right, the third scene is a close-up. This is very interesting, because we are not going to work with portraits or just with the faces of the characters. It's more about their hands and how they use the product. So therefore, in your prompt, again, I would stress it more and more because it's very important to be specific. Close-up of architect's hands on a tablet. I'm mentioning again my character and again the product I want to highlight. And I also specify that he interacts with a 3D model, rotates it, zooms it in, and so on. And because I learned from my previous mistakes, I immediately applied style reference here to thrive for visual consistency, and also digital art as my effect. So This is what I got, and you can really see that it was quite interesting because AI literally put, like the 3D model on a tablet, not as a part of user interface, but literally on it. Also, some of the images have mountains in the background, which is not very consistent with the previous scenes. And also, the outfit of my persona. He wears a suit here, which is weird because that's not how it was in the previous scenes. So again, I didn't work anymore here with the prompt. I didn't change it. I just basically learned from my previous experiment. I, again, lowered visual intensity and also increased the level of adherence. And here I actually got something that made more sense. You could clearly see a close-up, the interaction. Of course, you do not see my product on a tablet, which is quite a pity. But that's not a problem at all, because you can use any other image editor, for example, Photoshop, and actually just paste your image there, and it works as well. So in the end, this was the image that I chose, and it served me as a perfect visual for my third scene of a close-up. All right, so final scene, the moment of interaction. And it's also very interesting because here we are introducing multiple characters. So again, I start my prompt with my persona, architect who holds a tablet, but then I also introduce the second character, who is a construction worker. And I also specify that one person holds a tablet and another person is pointing at the building. And again, I use style reference just to try for consistency. So I immediately decided to, again, lower my visual intensity and keep my level of adherence or strength in the middle. And I immediately got something better. So you can see when you learn from your experiments, when you learn from your mistakes, your workflow actually speeds up because you already know what you are doing. So therefore, I just chose this image that I would say is perfect for, to show the moment of collaboration for my last scene. So finally, this is the result. I would say for the first try, it was quite nice because you have the consistent color, you have the consistent styling. It looks fun, it looks engaging, not too serious, which was really great to communicate my main message with my design direction. However, I would say you might already have noticed when you look at the face of the character across the scenes, it doesn't really match 100%. So this is still something to be aware about AI. It's not perfect. It actually can thrive for consistency, but it's not really 100%. So, but still, if I compare my sketches that I did before and AI work, I would say it's amazing because if I had to do it by myself from scratch, first of all, it would never happen. And also, I could never really find it online, which also makes my work unique because I'm pretty sure that none of the other designers or companies ever use these images for their storyboards. So, key learnings, what I learned from this journey is, of course, first of all, prompt quality matters. It can either make or break your AI visual. So make sure that you spend a lot of time on crafting your prompt. Then I would also say plan ahead for efficiency. As I mentioned before, get clear on who your character is, how many scenes you want to generate, what is going to be there. Just describe it, write it out on paper, sketch it out. Because if you don't do it, you'll just get into the rabbit hole of like regenerating, iterating, and never actually finding something that you really need. And of course, use reference images to strive for visual consistency. That's important, because if you don't do that, then every scene that you'll get will just look random. It will not match at all. And of course, remember that AI is still limited. It can, of course, produce impressive images. It looks really pretty, it's nice. But when it comes to some complex compositions or, for example, emotions, I noticed that AI was really struggling. And of course, I would still get like 6 fingers on head or some weird faces. That's really common when you work with AI. A bit more on prompts, just kind of to summarize all of the things that I said before. Avoid vague prompts. Don't stop just on 3 keywords. Make it descriptive, make it more concise, basically make it with more details. Then, of course, avoid contradictory instructions. So for example, architect in bright but shadowy area. AI does not really understand it, and you will get something super weird that you would not want to use for your work. And yeah, I would say also avoid list of words, because it doesn't work. It's way better to actually have the full sentence of describing what exactly you want. So therefore, better prompts, they are descriptive. They include your character, your scene, environment, and all of those details. Of course, it's also detailed means that you add there styling, colors, texture. You're very specific on what you want. And of course, specific meaning that you focus on one key scene. You don't want to actually generate something that is a combination of multiple scenes, because you will not get the result that makes sense. So remember this: descriptive, detailed, and specific. And of course, biases. Yeah, when we work with AI, we always talk about biases, and this is something that I also faced. So, you know, like when I asked Adobe Firefly to generate a set of images of architects, I would get some kind of stereotypical or maybe historical reflection and the view on this profession. When it comes to gender or age, you could clearly see that the results were a bit biased. But besides those biases that are quite standard for other AI tools, I also got something unexpected, because there were also biases toward architectural styles. And that's quite interesting, because you could clearly see that Adobe Firefly really preferred high-profile urban buildings rather than just some small rural projects. And with all of those glassy, modern skyscrapers, you could clearly see preference for Western architectural style rather than just non-Western, some traditional style. But what can you do as a user? Because you don't build this model, you cannot really change it. Well, these are my tips. First of all, be mindful of how you craft your prompt. As I mentioned before, spend a lot of time on it, but not just to make it specific, but also to make sure it's inclusive. Make sure that it represents all the cultures, diverse set of characters, age, gender, and so on. When you work also with reference images, make sure that they are also inclusive, that they represent your audience. And finally, which is a no-brainer, stay critical. When you get something from AI, just ask yourself, does it really make sense? Is it inclusive enough? Is it diverse? Can I make it better? Maybe I can use other reference images, or maybe I can tweak my prompt. And I'm also a fan of feedback, of giving feedback all the time. And I know it might sound a bit boring, but I really think that you have to share it with creators. When you see something that doesn't make sense, you can just select it and actually add your note. Also here you can see that you can mark if it's biased or offensive content, and it's very important because it's the only way to let creators know that something is wrong with their model, that they have to do it better. So I really would advise, take your time and submit your feedback. So anyways, I still recommend you to give it a try, even though there are some limitations and biases. I would say AI image generators give us incredible power of being creative, of actually doing something unique, to generate some images that were never seen before in the world and never used by other designers. I definitely recommend you to give it a try, not just for your storyboards, but even maybe for other parts of your project. Thank you so much. I hope it was really interesting. This is my website. You can scan it to learn more about me, and I'm very happy to answer all of your questions.